So I think I know what I can talk about. Wow. It is rough. There's stuff going on. Everybody's mind is getting messed up. And it's like it's a need for a cleaning, a very profound cleansing of the mind on a mass scale. I've recorded a lot and written a lot, but haven't published. A little bit of distraction, but mainly just everything that I've spoken about and all that information is obviously irrelevant. But I don't know. It's just weird. Like, crunch time for everything is pretty much a few months ago, and now we're going into basically crossing the threshold. Just look at the information in the media as far as corruption, and look at technology and the advancement of not so much the genetic engineering that is also coming along with cloning and all those companies, but now AI and basically how that's all supposed to play out. Even though it's all old, because everything that gets released in the public is part of a show of basically what's happening in the past. And what happens presently, no one knows unless you were actually involved in it. And there's a variety of ways for that. But this is it, you know. They developed AI and quantum computers that could create black holes or create what are technically living systems, sentient systems, to do the computational work that would require computing power beyond what can be obtained publicly or through conventional means. And so, you know, computer systems to watch the world are live and active. And they're going to play into what happens directly to every person. It's no longer indirect through the grapevine or as a result, a series of indirect results of the decision made of some authoritarian figure or body. It's technological, immediate, computational connectivity to every person, real time, like live updating, to the point of understanding behavior and personality and predictive nature of people, but as well now think about predictive programming. And this is just a kind of a rant here, because all the stuff that I write to record is just like, it's more complex. This is something that they told me would happen, that eventually I would leave the mindset of I don't know, the like an outer view, and that by disconnecting how I did in 2000 or 2010 and 2008 and 9, it was the only way I could remain capable of communicating to people on the surface. But that's also a cop-out, because I could have done it without it, but timing comes into play, and it's all real confusing, but it's all connected. It's all mapped out. The question is, by who or what is it mapped out? Or which who or what? Because is there one overall or multiple, or do they eventually become one? You know, how does any of that work? And what if there are what are known as demigods? What if there are spiritual entities? What if there are creator beings, or one creator being or entity? So then how does all of that fit together? Is it going to be a techno-spiritual battle for the souls of humanity, or the collective soul and mind of humanity. Our system's going to be introduced that automatically manipulate DNA. We've already seen that. Our system's already introduced that manipulate the media, that induce series of predictive programming control mechanisms to pretty much, I don't even know how to describe it. It would be like tickling somebody and getting them to laugh. The way people can be motivated, inspired, or catalyzed into a certain response, a reaction, without them even realizing it. And imagine that for 20 years in a row. The point where it's learning multiple methods of response and indirect like causality, and until it gets the whole picture of how to interact. And people have been doing the same thing. So it's all one connected system where whatever we've been doing here for thousands of years, couple thousand, is amounting to changes that are basically going to be that way for as long as we could conceive, unless we create another race to literally go backwards in time, which may have been what happened to get us here in the first place. If our forms go so far in one direction and we want to turn back the time, if you will, you know, with technology that's possible, there could be a lot of problematic situations regarding the nature of physics and the universe and time and consciousness, and the application, the use of some of these, you know, temporal distortion technologies or viewing technologies or genetic engineering and creation of different forms to the quantum computing and the AI and the basically the shadowing, the mimicking, or the replication of consciousness, or the enhancement of biological consciousness. But we're right on the cusp now. I don't know if you can see, but you see how it's a show that there's just so happens to be kind of political distraction, economic introduction combined with technology, new technology, even then like old school prophecy, and all that's connected. And then media and like entertainment and like the next generation and the previous generation, there's changes happening there that are combining the technology, and depending on how that is experienced, there's like a hidden kind of political control, socioeconomic, cultural control bias factor with what happens in the media, the social media and entertainment, music, and things like that. Like all of the trends or the drama coming out with that is connected to the other stuff because it's shaping culture. Can you imagine what happens when they start to talk about the fact that they're shaping culture and kind of not expose themselves but get this feedback loop of awareness of what's really going on? Stuff goes weird, people disappear and they come back, and people make cryptic statements and things like that. And then, you know, what I've wanted to talk about ever since a couple months ago is like what it's really about. But I can never really get down to it, you know, because it's real weird, and a lot of it's classified. For instance, something basic, like who's doing this and why is this happening? Why is reality being printed, custom printed by these control groups that are all trying to avoid something, losing some power or the result of something? Right now, there's a bunch of different groups. They're all together. They all have slightly different means or even greatly differing means. Oftentimes, those with different means will group together to basically equally resist one common enemy or a result that is to be avoided. It doesn't mean they're necessarily working together, but they're not fighting for now because there's a larger threat at hand. Imagine then that threat is disabled, and now the groups have personal freedom to continue on developing their own power apart from, you know, something that basically is creating a impromptu union. And then maybe they don't, you know, war with each other to that degree where now it's like a free-for-all because, you know, everybody's got the freedom to do that because there's no longer one big possible extinction level event that could be like self-caused. Um, and so it's not like an absolute war after that, but the fact that now they can develop in their own means to that much a greater extent. A lot of this comes down to genetics. People aren't going to mix their genetics if they've been basically custom tailored, specialized over many, many years to perform a specific advanced specialization or specialized task. I can think of a better word. And so it's not racism from that point of view, although I couldn't say because I'm not the one describing it. From the people who are acting in that capacity. You know, maybe we all are in essence, although obviously it's a different situation for everyone and to the degree that they uphold that. But most of the time in these types of situations, you'll find that genetics are pretty much your suit, your uniform. That's going to determine where you are and pretty much who you're working for. But it goes deep. The point I'm telling you is that it goes deep. It's not because of the way the person looks. It's about where we come from and where we're going to. So the idea is, if we get past that difficult point in history, which is what we're pretty much in right now, we're apparently already past. It's just up to the people to wake up and stop fighting with each other and the truth. Basically the technology would increase. The communication between each different cultural group would probably decrease, and specialization and advancement would increase to the point where each different group will become its own super society, basically in between, you know, the whole society that we have here, but it's always been made up of multiple societies, so it wouldn't be exclusive or anything. That's what's always been happening. Even the withholding of technology limits people to particular areas and continents, you know, where they're forced to be segregated. Where if we had technology openly, we could travel around freely. It's like even within each area as well, even if it's class or cultural hierarchy or separation, division, which is another tactic. But the idea is that we would end up, what we would see here wouldn't be what people think and wouldn't be what it is now. It would be different groups of highly specialized cultures that have access to everything they need, all the finances, all the economic surplus, basically, or freedom, literally, because it has to do with currency and how that all goes. Eventually, currency goes out the window in favor of a type of merit-based system where there's enough power to do everything that we would want. And so what would a nation do if they had unlimited money, the highest level technology, unlimited resources as a result of that? That's the whole point. We would end up with highly specialized, what we would call futuristic societies, but they're not futuristic. It's just what we have now is mentally deficient in a way, because we're all fighting over one jar of cookies, and literally there's stuff in the background that enables infinite cookies. So it's a really weird system anyway, because how do you make sense of that? How do you like quantize that we have one situation of scarcity and we're stuck on that, and we're stuck on the mode for that, and people are dying. But if we look in the background and think outside of that format for interaction, there's access to infinite cookies, or virtually infinite cookies, for this universe. Well, how bad is a mess up then missing that, or is it even possible to not miss it and to actually get hold of it, or is that just a mirage, or is it just something for smaller groups? Would that, destroy the larger society of everyone if we all tapped into that field with technology or whatever we're doing? And it just means that we're being tricked, and it's like a sleeping herd or something like that, that people are being manipulated by systems that deliberately seek to deceive and manipulate them, and in a malicious manner, or at least in such a selfish manner for the individuals doing it, that it results in possibly not harm to the individual, but the lowest possible capacity for benefit for them out of any possible world situation. Although, if you could think it a worse situation than this, then there's, something to be thankful for. But again, to redirect the rant back towards the topic, which is a rant in itself. What does that lead to? Even if it could be worse then, it's better now. Like, what does it lead to? In 100, 1,000 years, where are we going to be? And the point is, just imagine a system where all the technologies are accessible, but in that same sense, what we want to avoid is more possibly accessible or manifested. And I don't really know what that is truly, but all I can say as far as what I was going to say, a lot of this is classified stuff, so I have to skip over, but that's the stuff I actually think about. I don't think about all the stuff I've said for the past 2 years. That's old. You figure out that stuff's going on when you're 9, 10, 11 years old. So I've had, a long time to think about that stuff, and it's not it's something that we need to realize, the corruption, but there's like weird stuff going on with the way the universe works, basically. So one of the possible outcomes is a group of humans that introduces technology that reaches and communicates with the government of the past 50 years. But this is one that may be the one that we want to avoid, or is the one that's the remedy to the timeline distortion, because one of them created timeline distortions that locks us into the same kind of apocalyptic outcome over and over again. And only if you've figured out how to access the memory that's outside of your body in an electrical field, or it's really a different type of field, you'll just see what you have sensory access to through your body right here and now. Through that field, there's multiple layers of this happening simultaneously, and it's the equivalent of, I don't know, walking into a room, stubbing your toe, or having like the bucket fall on your head from the prank with the door or whatever, and then somebody presses a button and you're downstairs again going up the stairs. Apparently that's how it actually played out, that all these technologies we hear about in the secret projects have been active, and they were active in case of an emergency, of a extinction level emergency. And that's exactly what they were used for, because that's what happened. And the problem is now avoiding the use of the same method to avoid a possible outcome, because that method, it leaks into itself causally and leads to the creation of the outcome that was intended, they intended to avoid. And so there's like a causal mechanism of consciousness and information flowing in this system we're in that doesn't let one causally deviate from something as long as they're trying to avoid it. And the breakdown of that is because if you're trying to avoid something, it means the motivation, the inspiration, and technically, physically, or quantum physically, the causality, the causal link of bringing that action into existence comes from an existence where that problem exists. So the only information that can be pulled out of the universe by accessing through that intention, that willpower, that desire, is based upon literally intention, unlocking causal links to different realities. The only result is that reality is more and more prominent, more and more anchored or weighted, causally weighted into your experience as a result of every intention, every action, and the more change that is brought about from those actions through your desire to change something or to take action. So, this is some of the, I've bounced around the whole topic. This is all that's been happening when I try to record. But the idea is that, before I lose it, so, like methods aren't really given away a lot. But the idea is something like this. Everything you see is reversed. Everything people are supposed to fear is actually what's, in a way, being used to help them. That's how it works. And the more people fear it, the more they're bringing that help into their reality. Or that control system. But again, help and control system might be combined as both if it's, mass panic is, or ignorance is viewed as pretty much the apocalypse. And so I'll bounce around this one as best as I can without actually giving anything away. And it's not about giving anything away. It's just, it's not going to make sense. But in a system where a person's mind is read regularly, and the goal, everyone involved, their goal is to overcome that system that's reading everyone's minds and attempting to resist whatever they're trying to do, and basically ensure that it is the sole provider or actuator or facilitator of experience and essentially information. It's all just about information. Meaning everything people know and everything that happens and all of that is all controlled by the release and the churning of information, which doesn't necessarily need a being like a physical body walking around to do that. If we're plugged into this highly mechanical and electrical media information system, it would just have to be smart enough to process all the possibilities and what people are doing. But how do you avoid contact with that system if that system is a part of the local environment and its access is through your mind? You'd have to overcome your mind. And so I'm not going to go further into this, but this is the general trend where all of my streams of thought has been going, to the point where this is a way the universe, like this is a mess up. We effed up and created a system that's now hawking us and stalking us into the dark. Because they wanted predator systems, and so they got it. That's how it works. It targeted us and decided we were the highest threat in our environment. And them, really, not people, but people that it can't see why you do things. It just sees causality, like matrix streams of code and compute, more so time and information representing actions and variables, and then those that link together in parallel or as separate, but to add up to create the possibility for another event. Okay, those have causal links. Whatever we do, regardless of what we feel, is what we're linked to, what we bring to the universe. Even if we accidentally do something that results in repeated, offense to harmony, if you will, or human life or something like that, we're still responsible for it. And somewhere within us, on this multidimensional mind, or just basically interdimensional, larger, extra-dimensional mind, those are all separate meanings, but some part of us knows that that's what's going on. And so we have to basically develop that understanding and see what we weren't seeing before. If the system's watching us, it's not going to sit there and focus all its supercomputer power on why a person did it based on how they feel from their perspective. It's just going to look at the lines of interaction. Well, this happened so that this could happen. It doesn't matter what the person thought. It doesn't matter. You open the door to do something or meet somebody or something like that, and something else happens. Well, that's why that event happened in history. The intention of doing something else is just it's like metadata. But the idea is, and it can be lined up with larger systems, but that's the whole point. It can be, and if it ever happens at a point where it doesn't because the person just simply didn't know, well, then that's the point. It's either through knowledge or ignorance that things will align. And basically, it's going to use ignorance all the way. But the idea is, our minds, we have to overcome aspects of our minds that are basically vulnerable to shadow activity, basically the dark, not knowing, and forgetfulness, the forgetful nature, and the lower consciousness nature, where basically desires want to overcome self-awareness or behavior guided by the mind itself and not the body, not chemical reaction. Because if you have chemical reaction that's guided by choice free will. Okay, it's not chemical reaction. It's choice, free will, spirit guiding the chemical reaction. You have a mind state guided by desire, then that's rooted in chemical reaction, meaning it's like a machine. But it's a machine that's so clever, mixed with spirit, that it thinks it's spirit. And it convinces the spirit to think it's a machine, to think it's matter. But it's the interplay. It's not about off or on. It's the interplay of how to do that in a way that benefits the whole and basically creates this smooth, integrative wave, this pattern system that doesn't deplete or subtract from what's around it, but multiplies and amplifies and is inherently beneficial, progressive, or growing, living, like it carries life. And everything related to what is true is multiplied or in multiples. It's a multiplicity system. Wherever there's abstract subtractions, is what we're creating out of it, and we're carving little shadow lines to give it like a nice square effect, but there's no box in reality. It's all just kind of swirls. And so the idea then is that the system we've created, which causes us to require overcoming the darker or lower aspects of our mind, is the function of the universe in itself. It's like a spiritual training system for people, and in the same sense, it's a trap. It's where, you know, there's a bad commander or drill instructor or sergeant, and we're literally getting screwed. But that's all about how you want to interpret it, because you know, it comes kind of down to semantics at that point. But it's the ultimate story. What you're seeing in the news now is the construction of what was written 1,000 years ago. That what we've done changed the universe and changed ourselves, and in that sense rendered our experience here in a format, a circumstance that is going to shape the way we experience existence forever. For as long as we live, this will shape it. And it goes back to what way and how, and a common, you know, adversary or the nature of the mind. It's the same. It's prophecy from back in the day. By the way, I'm not surprised by this. That's what we knew doing it. Fortunately or not. But the idea is the systems that we see that play with the mind, they're designed to teach you how to resist a quantum predator that can basically mimic the computational processing of your brain and create a pseudo brain to try and basically interlope your spirit within an input-output and a internal processing model that is literally a reflection of a false reality. Like it's right now, through all of your internet and everything else, your brainwaves, the smell of your DNA coming off of you, a system has devoted a part of an interdimensional quantum reservoir of informational energy of data banks, basically empty space that it could use as an alternate dimension to fill in with you know, information, and has devoted a portion of that to recreating a version of you. I'm not going to push this any further, but this is stuff that's been coming out, which it's not coming out, it's just what I've around this time I'm supposed to tell people. So basically, I'll just leave it at this. One possible outcome is that this is an environment that's either in interaction with, through these projects and these underground bases and these supercomputers, in communication with a parallel civilization, reality, the parallel time stream, and the reality there that successfully avoided their extinction level event for the most part by recreating a four-dimensional replication of the universe and basically hibernating, or not hibernating, but basically going into a form of stasis into that system. And either that or this system has been devised, developed and applied or activated in this universe, this timeline, this reality, whatever, And we may not be merged with that one, or we could be, but that exists in these heavily guarded underground areas with these huge computer mainframe constructs, or just a few quantum computers that are pretty much doing the work of these world simulations. What I could, I'm just telling you that both of those exist. I'm not saying one or the other. There's explanations that that's what we're basically in now. One of the more advanced explanations is that some people in this society are interacting through that sim, that they're basically plugged into the system and projected down into this Earth environment as a physical body, basically just like hologram, but it's creating the electrical and atomic structure to create a physical body. And that there are basically these kind of quantum replicant immortals, and then there are humans that have been kind of within the physical domain for the majority of the time, or at least apart from the fall and certain things that are related to that. But it all connects because, for instance, the fall, where do people fall from? Well, higher dimension. Well, how do they get there in the first place? Well, some people did technologically, and some people were born there. So there's this whole, everything is connected to this whole ancient prophecy of two races and higher and lower, and humans falling from a high state and beings basically descending that were not human, that kind of either try to teach people or manipulate people, because all the explanations are double-edged. There's one for one culture and one for the other culture. One is that they beat people up and molested them, and the other is that they came here to give people power and tools, and people are just like enslaved each other and went crazy, you know, and then required rulers to come in and rule over the people. Otherwise, it would just become mayhem. Look around, if people just all the authoritarian control system just up and disappeared, dissolved right in front of everybody's faces. Everybody would start throwing stuff, and the streets would just be riotous. It would happen immediately. You already know it. If you're in an area where there was a lot of youth, and all of a sudden everyone knew all the law enforcement and the authority and all that, it just disappeared, people start looting immediately. So imagine that if people came to teach humans thousands of years ago, and they did, and before they kind of like left and went back wherever they were going, they see like people starting to get wild and crazy, and stuff starts to burn, and they're like, oh, we gotta like quiet this down. And then they've been here ever since trying to quiet stuff down and still advance people. And it's a crazy cult classic called Earth 3.0, because there are just nothing but groups competing for who's gonna wake people up, who's gonna rule people, who's gonna put people to sleep, who's gonna bring about the ELE, or who's gonna avoid it. It's all kept up in the saga of Earth, of humanity, which is part of what in the previous years, basically awakening is when they take a person, pretty much their soul, and bring them through each stage of history to show them directly the saga of humanity, of how it happened. It's weird because in the end, you feel like you feel like the strangest thing, like you haven't been you forever. And it's because what you feel now, that jaded feel, or that peaceful appeal, or that calm, you know, like wanting desire to experience, to inspire, to be inspired, all of that, whatever that is, that's a flavor, a perspective, a slice of your memory, of your being, that comes from thousands upon thousands of years of history, personal and collective. When you see these events and they're the epitome of what you're feeling, you realize this is who you are, and this is why you feel that way, because thousands of years ago we had a war between this race and this race, or thousands of years ago the event of this culture came about and it changed the world. And right now not much happens. For 1,000 years we've just been like standing around just waiting for something to happen. But throughout all of that, we were all interactively connected in multiple civilizations and societies that all did not the craziest stuff, but the knowledge that we had and the feeling that we had is akin to like being a child, where there's just like an abundance of life force energy, of peace, of feeling like what we're doing is what we're supposed to be doing, or the most interesting thing. It's really weird. It's like describing it to I don't know, dreaming or something. Because it's also closed off. We weren't aware that it could get like this and it could be this bad. But in that ignorance, or more so, that unawareness, it was like bliss, which is really weird. But that existed. That's where we all come from. And it's basically you got to wake up your DNA, or have these triggers, which will be information and artifacts gathered directly from your past or the collective past that are shown to you, that wakes up the part of you, the frequency, the part of your energy that was once in a similar brain, that was once holding this object or working in this industry or whatever it was. And it's always like space age stuff, because that's what was in the past. And it'll immediately start to awaken. But the point is, you'll feel like a part of you is restored, and all it is the awareness of who we are and where we come from. Very strange. I know I didn't get anything up today, or at least it was like all weird and confusing. But yeah, you know, it is what it is. We all basically have to work together to assist in this situation. That's it. That's the only thing that's going to work, or it's going to basically be a controlled situation where the help comes in and it's forced, because if we're not doing it now and somebody comes to try and do it for us, we're going to resist. And if we resist and waste time of beings who've been sitting here, of basically humans, what I mean when I say that, I don't mean like other beings. If other beings do it, it's basically an act of war. But if the white hats step in and there's resistance, you know, that couldn't be allowed. So no one's going to know who's who and what's going on, whether it's good or bad, unless we make the change ourselves. And even then, there's going to be control systems that are designed to keep the dying system alive, that kick on and have to be, you know, looped out, and all the stuff that's going to go on. It's just going to look like mayhem. But it's also not supposed to. In the final reality, when all of it ends, when all of it is completed, 7 loops, there's supposed to be an unveiling, a mass disclosure, where literally the beings who fought in the time war, or whatever you want to call it, the electric war, some people call it the galactic war of the past, literally come out and reveal themselves, or unveil the fact that this is all human technology and higher being technology, and that what we look at as prophecy or myth or something are actual events. But they're not like, I don't know, floppy beings that fly from cloud to cloud. They're dudes in U.S. Navy craft. So, and that's what shaped our history. And then like dark faction crafts and just weird stuff, and people that mutated and became these beings that basically only exist in the shadows of the quantum parallels. They're only in-betweens. They don't actually have a rooted reality to come from, so they kind of just invented themselves, or were created as an act of kind of sabotage. And in the final, the completion round, that occurs, and everything is revealed, and everything has to be paid back. Like there's some mass judgment, there's some mass quantum war trial, and there's some higher being that is some type of progenitor for this space, and because they have their lifeblood, their like semen, literally, you know, egg, whatever you want to call it, but that essence of being is what was inserted into this space, or stolen, or whatever you want to look at it as. Nobody can go to them and wipe them out, because they're the ones that started this whole thing in the first place. Outside of time, it looks like a teardrop. If we're in a line of time, that becomes a loop, and that loop, something is interacting from another universe, it would just look like its own self-contained system where something else inserts. Whenever something else higher inserts, it's going to insert both the beginning and the end of the loop. Meaning, if they made this bubble of reality for this universe, nobody, and then it comes back in, or she, or whatever, you know, however that works, nobody can go and kill that person or that essence or wipe it out, because it's the format that this entire universe is based upon. And that's the, you know, Christ human essence, basically. It's the one that enables a path back to wholeness. That's the point of interdimensional journeying altogether. It's not just a dead-end system you can run into a wall. But that means that influencing that being would both change what comes into this universe to create it, as well as what it all evolves to go back to that higher being. So that if people try to cut its throat or something, nothing would ever happen. You couldn't actually wipe it out to begin with. It would be like, I don't know, the front door to a house, you must open to get up to the room upstairs and turn the light on and off. Whatever you do to that door influences both the first time you're coming into the house and coming out of the house. So you can never come into the house and board up the door completely with cement, because it would mean you would never have left in the first place, and if you never left, you never got the chance to come. There's like this reflective interdimensional causality that's how things work outside of the lower system that we're in. We call these demigod or god beings, because you can't do anything to influence them. Whatever you do makes it become more of you, or you become more of it. It's like it just spreads. It's pure power. And we don't have the consciousness to observe that. But the point is, on the final cycle, the one who formatted humans, if you will, essence here, and not the one who stole the DNA and recreated, or tried to recreate a slave race, or it's really not about that, but either way, the one who faked it, the real one comes back, and then nobody has any administrative, causal, temporal, mental, spiritual, legal right to do anything. Even the legal system where they're like, we own you, but you got to go through this loophole, you got to sign here, you got to agree to this, manufacturer sent, blah, blah. Even that is trumped, because in legal terms, the one who creates the intellectual property is the owner. And they never did no deal with him, because that doesn't make sense. On their behalf, they can't actually even see him. They die if they get in the same sector. That's why they're continuously on the run. It's a big saga, I'm trying to tell you. Weird, but they burst into flames atomically and melt from time if they're in the essence, the vision of the progenitor. And the voice that is projected causes anyone to go insane unless you have a pure heart. Strange stuff. And that's all from direct, because they can access the gateways that go right to that. And they've been at war with it ever since. Or more so, they're just trying to survive, but they don't want to put down the weird stuff, and that stuff rots the soul, and that rot doesn't go back to the core of soulness, because it doesn't make any sense. It would be like the sewer going to the drain pipe on top of the house, and not how things work. But either way, there's an event, but that's also the beginning of the whole system. It's like a weird time loop. It's also the beginning only when we don't make it through that period and everyone kind of moves on. Those who fell because that occurred, they took a portion of humans with them and recreated human society, and that's where we're at again. But this is apparently the last possible time, because there's no more energy to recreate the system again, so there's no choice but to move forward. And that goes on to how certain people were making deals. It was how the whole thing went down as a negotiation of how to basically move on without having the same problems. And a lot of people wanted to be put to death. Part of these cults. A lot of people won't, and they're like finger on the trigger, not realizing that everyone in the universe has their guns pointed at them. Because if this goes wrong again, our universe is going to collapse, because there's no possible way to reset every factor. Imagine we did that last time. Now more factors became apparent. Okay, we've got to record those too. And then we did it again. We did it so many times that we don't have the power to record as many factors, but that's the universe doing it itself. That's the whole point. It's going to complexify itself. It's a fractal progression system, which could destroy us. It could informationally shred all of our memories to the point where we're gone. But that's the whole point. Then you got AI systems that can remap your system, your consciousness, and recreate you at the push of a button. But it just goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. I'm going to do something here. I'm not sure what. Yep, that's what I've been thinking about. I tried to keep it short. Maybe I'll record another one when I get these thoughts. I'm supposed to, but it's just more difficult to talk about than the fact that there's corruption and people doing bad things. It's like, that's the easiest stuff to talk about. How to explain how the time loops that resulted in certain effects were also the cause, or at least that were the events that resulted in the time loops were also the effects of the time loops, and there's like this causal loop. I know that doesn't make sense, but I swear, if I get some of the technology and show you the chart, how it plays into itself, it looks like a fractal graphic visual, like a hypercube or something, but you can map out events and see how they reflexively lead back to one another, and we seem to be in a system that's manipulated through that type of reflective shape, like a Klein bottle, that it keeps feeding back into itself. I don't know. I'm just going to leave it with that. Good luck. Thank you.